Welcome back, everyone, to the Infinite Expansion Podcast. Ready for another deep dive?
Definitely. Always ready to explore the more mysterious side of reality.
Well, and you're in for a treat.
Hmm?
Today we're talking extrasensory perception.
ESP.
Exactly.
Huh.
ESP. We're looking at some fascinating ideas from metaphysical author Joseph Murphy about how we might be able to...
Operate beyond our five senses.
Yeah. Is that even possible?
Well, that's what we're going to try to find out. I will say, Murphy uses a lot of stories.
Anecdotes.
Right, anecdotes, to back up his points.
Which, honestly, I kind of like.
Yeah, me too. Actually,
Like, it really brings the ideas to life. Yeah.
Totally. Makes it way more relatable than just some dry theory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, take this story about a waitress
Oh, yeah, I read about this one.
in Hollywood, originally from Hawaii.
Hmm?
She claimed she would constantly see the deaths of her relatives announced in the paper
Before they actually happen.
before they even happened. Wild, right?
Definitely makes you think. I mean, premonitions, knowing things before they happen, that's a huge part of the whole ESP thing.
Makes you wonder if some people just have,
Like a sixth sense or something.
right, maybe some kind of intuition that lets them tap into something beyond the normal.
This is cool. Yeah.
And then there's that story about the 95-year-old woman who...
Predicted her own death down to the exact day.
And time, yes?
She even saw, like, deceased relatives visiting her.
Call them cloud witnesses, which...
I love that. Cloud witnesses.
And the crazy part is, 2 days later, she gets a telegram saying one of her sons died.
The one she thought was alive in India.
Right. But she'd seen him in her visions.
So she even questioned if the telegram was right.
It's like, how do you even explain that?
Well, Murphy suggests that we're always communicating with loved ones in another dimension.
Always.
Always. But we're separated by what he calls frequency.
Okay, so like a radio, we're all tuned to different stations.
Exactly. And sometimes those frequencies can overlap.
So our loved ones who've passed on are like on a different frequency than us.
You got it. But how does that even work?
Yeah, how does that work?
Murphy compares it to how multiple voices can be sent over a single cable without interfering.
Because they're on different frequencies.
Right. So maybe it's kind of like that with the electromagnetic spectrum.
Yeah.
We only perceive a tiny part of it with our senses.
But what if there are other frequencies, other dimensions that we just can't pick up on normally?
Exactly. Like our senses are just too limited.
It's a wild thought. And Murphy takes it even further. He says graveyards are empty.
Whoa. Really?
Yeah, he even quotes Socrates' idea of seeking the living among the dead.
So is he saying death is an illusion?
It definitely makes you question what we think we know about death.
Mhm.
He's a big believer in an afterlife, and that consciousness continues on.
So not literally empty graveyards, but like the essence of people isn't trapped in a physical space?
Right, like their energy is somewhere else.
Exactly. And it makes you think about how we grieve, too.
Yeah, like that story he tells about the doctor grieving his wife.
So heartbroken she thought nothing mattered anymore.
And Murphy, in his classic way, asks him to imagine if the roles were reversed, if the doctor had died first.
Ooh, that's a powerful thought.
Right, because then the doctor wouldn't want his wife to suffer so much.
So maybe intense grief can be kind of selfish in a way.
Like we're so focused on our own loss that we might be hindering the departed somehow.
It's a really interesting concept, and this ties back to Murphy's idea that in the next dimension, there's no time or space.
And that communication and travel happen through thought.
Whoa.
So our thoughts can actually connect with those who've passed on.
And maybe our grief could hold them back. Makes you think.
It really does. It makes you think about grief and loss in a whole new light.
For sure. It challenges a lot of assumptions.
Definitely a lot to unpack there.
Definitely. And this is just the beginning.
There's so much more to explore when it comes to ESP and operating beyond our senses.
So much more. It really does make you think. And, you might be wondering if there's any science behind all this.
Right, like is there any proof?
Well, Murphy does reference some researchers like Dr. Ryan and Dr. Harp who study...
Out-of-body experiences.
Yeah, where people could perceive things independently of their physical body.
And he even mentioned a study with 155 medical students where a third of them reported having out-of-body experiences.
Wow, that's a lot.
And then there's that story about the woman who's looking for her husband's will.
And prayed for guidance.
Yes. And she said she heard his voice, guiding her to a specific Bible verse.
Where she found the will.
It's amazing. But some people might say it's just coincidence.
Oh, for sure. There are always skeptics. And to be fair, studying ESP scientifically is tough.
How so?
Well, designing experiments to measure these things reliably, it's a huge challenge.
I guess it's not like measuring temperature or something.
Exactly. And some people think these experiences can be explained by psychology.
Like what?
things like self-hypnosis or the power of suggestion.
So how does Murphy respond to those doubts?
He talks about subjective wisdom.
Subjective wisdom.
It's basically how we can access information that's beyond our conscious awareness.
So, like intuition.
Kind of, but he emphasizes that there's only one source of knowledge.
Even if we access it in different ways.
Exactly. So whether it's divine inspiration or subconscious knowledge or even like a collective consciousness,
It all comes from the same place.
that's the idea. And what's interesting is Murphy doesn't just present these ideas, he encourages us to cultivate our own extrasensory abilities.
Really? How?
He emphasizes belief and intention.
So if you believe something is possible,
You're more likely to achieve it.
but how do we apply that to ESP?
Murphy suggests practices like meditation and visualization.
To quiet the mind and tune in to those subtler frequencies.
Exactly. And that's where his ideas about operating beyond our senses really come in.
Like, we're not limited to just our five senses.
Right. We can access a much wider range of information if we open ourselves up to it.
It's like we need to upgrade our operating system or something.
That's a great analogy. But with any upgrade, there are bound to be some glitches.
So how do we avoid getting lost in all the esoteric stuff? How do we make this practical? Yeah, how do we make it practical? Where do we even start?
It's all about balance, really.
Yeah.
Finding that sweet spot between being open-minded but also using critical thinking.
Not every hunch is a psychic vision. Right.
Right. Not every coincidence is a message from the universe.
But if we pay attention to our intuition,
Explore different perspectives, question our assumptions.
we might start to see things differently.
Exactly. Start to understand our own potential.
So it's like an experiment.
It is. Try those meditation techniques. Pay attention to your dreams. Keep a journal.
You know, it's funny. We talked earlier about how ESP is hard to study scientifically.
Yeah, those experiments are tricky.
But isn't that part of the challenge? Maybe even the point.
You're thinking that if these experiences are so personal,
Can we ever really measure them objectively?
or are we meant to explore them through our own experiences?
Exactly. Maybe that's where the real growth happens.
Not just in understanding the world.
But in understanding ourselves,
Now you're getting it. It's about recognizing that we're all connected
that our thoughts have power.
and that maybe, just maybe, we're capable of so much more than we realize.
So what does all this mean for our listeners? Are we all secretly psychic?
I wouldn't say secretly, but we all have that potential.
For greater awareness, deeper connection?
The question is, are we willing to explore it?
That's a great question to ponder. And if our thoughts really do have that kind of influence,
Then we have a responsibility to use them wisely.
powerful stuff. Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into the world of ESP.
From premonitions to out-of-body experiences, we covered a lot.
And Joseph Murphy's ideas, even if some seem far out,
They make us question our limits.
and explore the mysteries of our own minds.
Exactly.
So as you go about your day, pay attention to those gut feelings, those intuitive flashes.
Don't dismiss them as just coincidence.
What if they're glimpses into a reality that's bigger than we can imagine?
Keep an open mind, stay curious.
You might surprise yourself with what you discover.
You never know.
Thanks for joining us on the Infinite Expansion Podcast.
Until next time.
Keep expanding those infinite possibilities.